All right, so we are going to get started. Welcome to our last session of the PAVE Summit. I am Arlene Lemus, the CEO for PAVE Prevention, which stands for Proactive Anti-Violence Education. And I hope that you are feeling like we're feeling at PAVE, which is the pivot to move our summit online and lay it out throughout the whole month in these smaller segments. Has really been incredible for us. We've learned a lot. We've enjoyed interacting with our panelists and our participants. And so we're just really grateful for the support we've received this month. We intentionally saved this session for our closing session. Our guests today and our panelists today really did make a decision to do something completely out of the box. Not only is the program out of the box that he'll be discussing today, but partnering with a training partner that was doing things completely different and took a chance on us, really. And we are just so fortunate for the partnership. We feel very proud of the work we have done with Macro, but we have learned so much from Macro as well. So without wasting any more time, I'm just so excited about this conversation. I'd like to introduce to you the program director for the Macro Community Responder Program in Oakland, California, Elliot Jones. Welcome, Elliot.
Hi, everyone. Really nice to be here. Yes, I'm the program manager for the Mobile Assistance Community Responders of Oakland, but more commonly known as Macro. Thank you for having me, Arlene.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot. I know that this is a very busy time for you. You're just coming out of that pilot status to now kind of full-blown program in Oakland. And so we're very proud of you that you've kind of step through that hurdle and look to take those next steps, which I'm sure is exciting and also a little nerve-wracking at the same time. So congratulations on that. Before we get started talking about Macro, could you just please share a little bit about yourself and your background, Elliot, and how you found yourself coming to Macro?
Well, yeah, absolutely. My name is Elliot. I am an Oakland native, grew up in the city, kind of grew up around city government and seeing the opportunity that programs can have to impact people's lives throughout the city. So through my adult life, being involved in community improvement and development programs, when I finally moved back to Oakland a few years ago and followed the advocacy that was going on about Macro before I even really understood what it was, it sounded like a great opportunity to be a part of something that could transform the city. Through chance and luck and opportunity, was able to get connected with the Oakland Fire Department and found out about the job posting and applied. And now I think I'm in a very unique position to give back to the city I grew up in and leave something behind that will hopefully outlast everyone on this call.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I know that you and your family have a lifetimes of commitment to making this world a better place. I will share a side note with our participants today that you are the grandson of Maya Angelou. And wow, what an incredible life you must have heard about and been a part of.
Yeah, it's been pretty good.
Oh, I love that smile, Elliot. I love that smile. Wow, great. Okay, so let's get started. So, we'll take a few steps back and talk about where this country was, where the world was, and what we were going through, what we were feeling collectively, the collective trauma that we were feeling after the George Floyd murder. And It inspired communities all around the world, definitely all around our country, to make some changes, to think about what public safety looked like in their communities, to stand up and take a little more ownership of what policing and public safety look like. And Oakland did that. Oakland stepped up. Many community organizations came forward and started pressuring for a community responder program. Can you share a little bit about that history and how Macro's initial steps started?
Yeah, absolutely. While all this predates me, you could even say that there was a groundswell of support within certain circles for an alternative response program even before the George Floyd tragedy. So Oakland, has a reputation for activism and really from every edge of the spectrum. There were groups that normally do not get on the same side that came together and advocated for this in their own way with their own goals, but they were really pushing for an alternative response program in the city. They were able to get a study commissioned by the Urban Strategies Council that examined if alternative response could work in Oakland. And while that was the foundational report that led to Macro being started, I think we all know what happened shortly thereafter. The world kind of shut down. So really, when it was decided that this program would live in the fire department, it had originally been committed to live within a CBO or a community-based organization. And it was at the 25th hour gifted to the fire department. In fact, my boss was in a meeting, in the city council meeting, for something totally different when it was decided that it would live in the fire department without consulting the fire department. But a testament to the Oakland Fire Department, they took on the challenge. They do not queue their calls, they go to every call. So what better organization to develop an alternative response program than some group with that much expertise? They do not, have the stigma that the police and law enforcement has within the region and within Oakland. So as this was decided upon, and the fire department embraced it, and it worked with the police department and city administration at the time to develop a plan that decided here were the call types, here what the teams are going to look like, and they were able to create union positions. This is a key piece because instead of treating this like a one-off program that's going to go away, they did all this at the back end to demonstrate that they are making a commitment to this program for the long term. So when you have those positions unionized and make them a part of the broader public safety fold, it shows that you're in this for the long haul. I will say that we were on a wildly accelerated timeline to launch Macro. From my hire date, thinking about this a lot lately, I think the second day after I was hired, I had to go in front of council, and the first question was asked is, when's it going to launch? And I was like, well, I just got here, so we'll have to figure that out. But, give me at least a week to talk to somebody. And from there, 6 months, we were able to launch the program, and that is recruiting, that is evangelizing, that is training, and that is coming up with an implementation plan. And all of it happened very fast, but it's a testament to the city of Oakland and all departments coalescing around this opportunity to do something truly different. So I'm really grateful that we were able to bring this into the fire department. I'm grateful that I've been able to be a part of it. And while there's still a lot of community voices out there, I just want everybody to understand that, this is just the first 18, 19 months. The goal now needs to be the next 18, 19 years. Because that's how we should look at these programs, that they're here to stay and that they do truly benefit the community.
Thank you, Elliot. And speaking about that need for longevity, right? And to really show the impact of it, I'm going to share one of the organizations and programs that kind of motivated Macro and kind of helped you shape it. You still put your Oakland twist on it, but but it motivated you. And that's a program out of Eugene, Oregon, which really started in 1989, believe it or not. And some of the it's been described as a strange collaboration between hippies and police. When it was started, and it now, since 1989, it's a 24/7 operation. It houses a degreed social worker or counselor with a paramedic. And they respond much like macro responds to those low acuity calls, things like sleeper in public, a mental health crisis, unhoused individual, things like this. And some domestic violence, some lower level domestic violence situations. And they have managed since 1989 to now expand to other communities outside of Eugene, and have landed themselves 2% of the police budget as of a year ago. I think you said that has changed and they are now housed in a different department. But 2% of the police budget, which is $2 million. And they are responding on average to 24,000 incidents or calls a year. So, I mean, they're doing fantastic work. I think you are that program 2.0 made just a little better. And I'll share my thoughts on that community involvement in a second. But so if you want to share a little bit about how you feel Cahoots shaped macro or contributed to macro.
Well, I think just the concept of alternative response, Cahoots gets a lot of credit. They jumped in, rolled up their sleeves, and did it effectively. Hearing that 24,000 plus stat, I find that comforting considering with, operating mostly one shift a day. In our first year, we got around 12,000. So, I understand that is, it's a good measure as them to have the barometer. Even though Oakland and Eugene are drastically different, as you alluded to. I would say that, of course, Cahoots is the godfather, but Portland street response was also very helpful in shaping that. I believe that the fire department, the chief at the time, she went to Portland and checked out how their program works, and really Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Albuquerque Community Safety was another group that was extremely helpful as we were trying to pull everything together. The challenge with Cahoots, it's so big, everybody's coming to it, and rightfully so. But once we got into the space and we learned that there were other communities trying this, and they were all very open to sharing their experiences, then we just had to figure out, well, what's going to work with Oakland in our context? And I mean, folks would share policies, folks would share call types, folks would share dispatching principles and different things. And, the one, I think, saving grace that I've had throughout this is that this network is new, and they are very open to communication and support. We talk to anybody that wants to talk about developing an alternative response program. We will talk to you. We understand the challenges. If we can help you avoid some of those missteps or get ahead of certain things, we're glad to do it. But it is a very a fascinating space because everybody has to do it their own way. And I think that, this shift away from PD and the budget for Cahoots to fire, it's very interesting. Let's see how that goes. Thankfully, here in Oakland, we've had a great commitment from the city of Oakland for our funding. But also the state of California has kicked in handsomely for with a grant. So these programs, in my opinion, should not be reliant on grant funding. They just need to be a part of the public safety apparatus. And sometimes there's tax measures and things that people can do for that. But I believe that needs to be off the table. When cities have these programs, they have to give them time to germinate and grow and evolve and over time really see how they will fit into the landscape. I think that's the benefit of us being in the fire department and having someone like my supervisor, Mrs. Venus Sport Ratliff, who's had over 30 years in an ambulance. She knows response, so she understood the levels. It could really give us a leap forward. But what we're doing today may not be what we're doing 20, 30 years from now. The fire department, as you see it today, is not the fire department of yesteryear. So things evolve, they grow, and truly they need to be given that space and time to do it. I think you can rush things and go too fast and either set expectations so high that you end up disappointing everybody. And that can be demoralizing to your team. That can be dangerous to your team by rushing into situations and trying to do more than you're maybe ready for. And that's one of the benefits I think that we had rolling out, that by happenstance, we were forced to do things our way, but our way became something that we found to be very effective and something that worked for us and by extension would work for the city. And that's a testament to our responders. I have to give them all the credit of the world that, you don't get to 12,000 plus calls in a year without some folks really busting their butts and having a commitment to show up every day to this very difficult work. It is draining. It is challenging, but it's important that somebody does it. So really just a testament to them and all of their hard work. And all the folks that are doing alternative response out there. I think, people don't necessarily understand it. It's very nuanced sometimes, but when you show up every day and you're trying to help, that's what matters. And I hope folks understand that and truly embrace this opportunity that, seems to be kind of spreading throughout the country.
So you touched upon it, and I mentioned it as well, the Oakland way. And we talked about Cahoots. So Cahoots is in an area that is 80% Caucasian. So it's a homogeneous community almost. And Oakland is quite different. And one of the things that really impacted me in your recruiting process and in my first interaction with the responders themselves is they were deeply rooted in the communities they were about to serve, and that you didn't ask them to have a degree in social work or counseling or things like this. You asked them to have high empathy scores, which they did when we tested them, and you wanted them to be committed to their community. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a lot of these decisions were made before I arrived, but it was decided to go in a different route than some of the other programs, with having a trained clinician and folks like that in the car. The underlining basis for macro isn't just the alternative response. It's also to release the burden off of the 911 system and fire companies and officers for responding to calls that they're not suited for, low acuity, quality of life calls of the such. And to do that, there needed to be a medical component. So the fire department went with the team makeup of an emergency medical technician and a community intervention specialist. That's a role that Oakland had created. It basically identifies individuals, again, high empathy scores, that are familiar not only with the city, but the service network, and should have some lived experience or understanding that makes it critical in their capacity to connect with people that are on the street. A little compassion goes a long way. Empathy goes a lot longer too. And really that's what we were looking for when we hired people. But you had to have a work ethic and an understanding that you're going out there to serve. And I think one thing it was clear is that first response isn't for everybody. It reads real good on a job application, and you can even get in the door. But when you understand, it's like, hey, this is every day. Like, you have to do this. You have to be on it. It can really, shock some people. So we've had some attrition, as to be expected in the space, but that's why we also had to truly double down on the mental health of the teams and really trying to make sure they're as whole as possible so that they can show up and continue to deliver. But yeah, I really think our model is great because you could get people in the door. Of course, who doesn't want to work for the fire department? Everybody loves the fire department. That's a recruiting tool in and of itself. People want to be firefighters. Great. Come on in, work with us, serve your community. And as the test opens up, apply. And best of luck. I hope that it does become a little bit of a feeder into other public safety departments if people see fit. But really, what Oakland has done by creating these two position classifications outside of a sworn capacity, they have committed. Like, you just can't get rid of the position. It's not how it works.
Mm.
So they are committing to finding something for these folks to do no matter what. And I think macro is the perfect place for them.
Mm. So you touched upon the importance of this mental health support. I think one of the things that really was the special sauce for our PAVE training was helping your responders. And we really learned a lot through this process when we wanted to best serve those macro responders and give them the tools to come home safely every day. We learned a lot. What would be important? What would be really important? And really, one of the things that surprisingly to me, when we started putting to paper this curriculum, was the need to instill a check-in process and a check-out process every day, and to check in personally, to use what we say all the time in our spectrum of awareness. What's going on here? So what's going on here with me this morning? Am I feeling 100%? Am I feeling 80%? Did my newborn keep me up? Am I fighting a little bug? All of these little questions that we ask ourselves before we step into the field. And then to have that conversation, check in with whoever you're partnered with that day. What's going on here? How are you feeling? Are you ready for today? Any calls you don't want to be the front person on, you want to be the back person on. That creating that kind of conversation and communication between responders, and then really taking care of yourself on the check-in process. I'm sure you remember we did a huge self-care and, find a way, find something, some routine that allows you to check out when you finished your shift. So we're really proud of that work.
Yeah, I think it was critical, especially early on when there was much more unknowns. When you kind of get in a rhythm and you kind of get into it, you have to start employing, different strategies to kind of keep things fresh. And rest is primarily the most important one. Passionate people can't always turn it off, but reinforcing some of those early conversations has been critical. But understanding that, sometimes having to encourage rest is just as important. It is, I think first responders across the board for a long time have just kind of grinned and bear it, have a grin and bear it kind of attitude. And people can be doing this work for a very, very long time. And then all of a sudden, kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
So we have to truly guard against burnout. And I think, this is across the board. Now, you may not feel it in other departments because they have, 100 plus, 200 plus, 400 plus staff. But, for us, we have 11 people working a 7-day-a-week program that operates citywide. When we can go later, we go later. But, even just a day shift, that can become taxing. So, I think the resilience of the team also was something that is shown through this initial period. They're committed, beyond just showing up and getting a check, to doing the work. And so when it does get taxing, they do push through and they lift each other up. And, we always try to find different ways to lighten the load, so to speak. So, let them off 15 minutes early. Hey, come back in. If you guys need the space to talk, it is here. But also really working them into the other aspects of the position. I mean, union meetings, you have space for this, like you have concerns, you have a mechanism. And that wasn't immediately available, but now that it is, seeing them access it, seeing them become more confident that they are truly a part of the city services infrastructure. It's very, it's just good to see because they've earned it. And yeah, so yeah.
Great. So I'm in Chicago. I can't say I'm a lifelong Chicagoan. Let's say my heart is a lifelong Chicagoan because I did live away for quite a while, but maintained incredible connections here. My family here is here. I still feel in my heart I'm a lifelong Chicagoan. And it pains me. These are my personal opinions. It pains me, it hurts my heart that we do not have a successful community responder program here, like a Cahoots, like a macro. I'd love a macro template being used here. And I'll share with you, we have a community responder called CARES. It stands for Crisis Assistance Response and Engagement. Has quite the large budget, 3.5 million. It is housed under the police department. And since its inception of September 2021 till October 2023, they have responded to 1,244 calls and done 900 follow-ups. So in comparison to Cahoots, which is responding to 24,000 a year, and Macro, which is responding to anywhere from 12 to 15,000 a year, it just is head scratching for me. I don't know if there is a question in there for you, Elliot, but it is a conundrum for me.
I would say, you know, what were they? They started September 2021. You know, just thinking about the timing of it all, you know, you're still coming out of the worst of the pandemic still. And I know things are coming back, and I'm not making excuses for anybody, but just understanding some of the challenges that they may have been going through. And you know, I think is this desire to run out the gate and just to sprint out the gate. And in some instances, you learn a lot when you do take that approach, when you really get after it and find ways to be active. But it seems like, you know, it seems like they're trying to focus on crisis level stuff. And one thing that I think we have done differently here in Oakland, and this is a credit to Portland, there's a lot to do before you get to crisis. And if you kind of shift your focus away from the crisis, and now there needs to be a crisis team. We in Oakland have the benefit of a county level crisis team that we can request support through, and other teams that focus on those crises. But you can also take a step back, look at the bigger spectrum, and say, hey, okay, this is the crisis CARES, and this is whatever X new thing will be that's going to focus on everything up to and under crisis. And I think that's a more effective approach, because so much of what I believe gets labeled as mental health crises, and don't get me wrong, there are many and they happen all the time, but a lot of this stuff is brought on by like desperation. You know, you've been out in the cold, you haven't eaten, you haven't had a conversation, you're slipping out of shared reality, and then you have a moment, you know, you snap, for lack of a better term. And if you can get to people before then, kind of assess what's going on, develop a rapport for them, make them comfortable with accepting help, you know, I think it's important to note that nothing Macro does is forced. So we prioritize the contact. You know, we've made over, you know, 15,000 contacts in this period, but we've only made 2,500 resource connections. And some people are like, well, why is it so hard? It's like, well, when you give people agency, they can tell you no, and people have a right to say no. We really have to determine what is a result, what is success, and I say success is us showing up and another team not having to show up, namely police or fire. And educating the public that there is a method to this. It's not in the people removal or harassment business. It's trying to connect, trying to encourage, and trying to break down some of what you're dealing with. So I think there's a lot of value in focusing on up to crisis. And I think a lot of people want to point to tragedies that were mental health in nature or other things. And really the real tragic ones didn't need a team at all, or you have your alternative response team try to show up. But because there's no non-emergent vehicles, and you're not running lights, everything stays cool. So it should be a lesson to the public to, you don't have to exaggerate to get a response, because you may get the wrong team. If you're honest and straightforward with whatever the situation is, you have a better chance of getting the right crew out there. Because crisis teams get pulled into all sorts of stuff, and there's never enough of them. But if you're able to deal with the lower level stuff that really isn't at the level of crisis, you don't have to worry about holding somebody, somebody's having an outburst, you can work through that. But yeah, crisis changes the game, to put it bluntly. Crisis, I'm seeing.
Yeah. Julie's comment.
Where are you from, Julie?
Columbus.
Ohio? Okay. How does one approach city government to trust that community members can indeed be trained and respond? Well, I think that's the community members, we employ government employees. They're all government employees. I think that's an important distinction. They have to develop the trust. The macro responders in the field had to truly develop the trust of the community. We showed up with t-shirts or polo shirts talking about, hey, I got a blanket and a water. You want to talk? And some people have tried to ding us for the blanket and the water, but that's just the, icebreaker. Maybe if you take a blanket and water for me, you'll take this connection to a food program tomorrow. And hopefully at the food program, they're doing some program trying to help you. But if not, next time I see you, maybe I can connect you to this housing thing. Really that flexibility to build trust was something that I think we kind of fell into. Without our dispatch, and our dispatch center is much maligned. 911 is much maligned. And I know we may touch on this in a minute, but it was important that we just had to get out there and work and demonstrate to them what's the type of volume we're going to do. What can they expect? Because this was all new. So as we went out there and we would on view and try to identify calls before they became calls, there's no sense, and no one's explained to me why we should have to wait to help people. If you see something, just deal with it. It's the proactive approach. Don't wait for somebody to call it in. We can help. And as we would do this, we would develop a rapport. We developed trust. People would talk to each other, and that goes a long way. And then as you develop that trust, you're seen as a trained professional. You've developed that, understanding against the other groups and within the community, and you can go far. And then they have all the protections as if, as being a part of the fire department and being a part of city government. And that does have a value to them. We pay more than every paramedic, entry-level paramedic spot in the city, actually not paramedic, EMT company in the city or in the region. That's not a mistake. We're trying to attract talent. We want people to come in the door and stay here and do this work for Oakland. And when, a huge testament to the fire department and the city, really putting the money where the mouth is and saying, yeah, we're going to make sure this is real. We're not going to treat this as a flash in the pan or something that is just a novelty thing. We have plans for alternative response in this city, and we're laying the foundation for it. And really, I think that's what's truly been done this first year. We don't know where it'll go in decades down the road, but because of this effort this first year, we've really laid a solid foundation.
I do want to step back, Elliot, so it's not missed by people joining us today. I don't know if we want to call it a hiccup or a pivot, or when your initial rollout of macro occurred, there were some issues with dispatch. And you made, in my opinion, such an incredible decision to say, I've got my guys trained. They're chomping at the bits to get out there and do great work in our community. And I am not going to wait for dispatch. We are going to entrench ourselves in the community. We're going to walk streets. We're going to drive slowly down streets. We're going to find people who need our help. And I thought it was such an incredible pivot, and really was, in my opinion, what kicked macro off in such a positive way. Can you share a little bit about what led to that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. We were told. put it bluntly, the former city administrator was very clear, like, you guys got to launch. And it wasn't like, when dispatch is ready, it was like, you have to do something. I think it needs to be clarified too. Dispatch has supported every macro call, every call that we've ever been on. They have been on the other side of the radio. They have held us down, but we were asking them to do something totally new and triaging calls. When you call the fire department, nobody asks you, weapons or anything like that. They're like, fire, medical, where, and then they show up. So really expecting them to do something new was a challenge. And while I know I've heard of other cities that dispatch shops outright refused, and they're in meet and confer with their union and the department to try to get through this impasse before they can start dispatching or taking dispatches. Our department, even begrudgingly sometimes, really worked with us over time to answer the dispatcher's questions, to prove and demonstrate that we're ready for this. And it took about 6 months for them dealing with us and even having to call us off some days, like, look, we're slammed. We don't have enough staff down here, and you guys are pushing 30, 40 today. We can't keep up. We need to, focus on the medical stuff. Okay. We'll be back in service tomorrow, let us know. And really having that understanding and appreciation for the work that they do. When we finally did turn on the ability to get dispatches through the 911 system, it took a little bit of trial and error. It did start out as a trickle, but it has picked up. And the one knock on the calls and requests coming in, 911 call, our dispatch calls take longer. You're usually trying to figure something out. On view calls, you determine when you're done. Like, all right, we're done. They didn't want anything. We're off. You can move a lot faster with those. But as we've seen the dispatches go up, on views have gone down. But it's such a central part of the culture of our program now. I believe that they will be, it'll be around forever. And it really is great. It does allow you to get an understanding of your environment, a deeper appreciation for your community. You're not just sitting in the car waiting to show up to something. You're around, you're seeing it, you're feeling it, you're understanding the impact that you have. And it's it's wild. Like, the moment we go out of service, we see 3 more requests. It's like, okay, another thing that we kind of had to do to because the city and still the community has demanded that there's an alternative phone number. And I think this is, yeah, I dig it, but it's all about who's going to answer that. And it's going into the fire shop that's still having to learn something new and create a new system and do all this stuff. They will do it. It's been committed to by our chief that we will do it. But it's been a long process because of their own challenges. So we had to create an email too. We created an email that goes directly to our teams that we have to do a little bit of triaging for, but it allows the public to just get to us directly. We've heard from, heavy users of the 911 system, people that call, 10, 15 times a day, that if we could give them an alternate avenue to seek help, that we could truly cut back on that. And we have one of those prolific callers, and are well-intentioned. He told somebody recently, he's like, my calls into 911 have decreased by 50% because I can reach macro. And so it's like, okay, we're slowly seeing how that works. Another phone number will do that, but you should have a phone number, an email, a text, whatever, however people need you, they should be able to reach you. And, it's a lot on dispatch. I think that, it's very tough, a very tough job. Most of the stuff that I think this is probably true of departments across the country are dealing with antiquated equipment. It's tough to recruit for. And again, they're not all the same. We have a PD dispatch and a fire dispatch, and then there's a county level dispatch. So there probably needs to be some restructuring at that point, but there's still people that are showing up every day, and they need to be given a little slack. But they've been with us since day one, kicking and screaming for much of it, but they have been with us since day one.
Yeah, but I do believe they really did gift macro that on-view opportunity that really took a motivated group of people, and 1, didn't hold them back, and 2, allowed them to engage with the community. I think that was huge.
No, absolutely. And I'm seeing your question or your statement, Clara. Yeah, uh, yeah, I really, feeling for what you guys are going through in Maine right now. The question is how we interact with existing street outreach programs and service programs. Is we actually have the opportunity to work with everybody. It's been pretty great. We just need a quick introduction, understand the services that you offer, how we can access those services, and if you accept drop-ins. It's not one size fits all. Of our 2,500 plus connections, they're not all the same. Some of them are as basic as food, water, food, shower, clothing, like that. And then a few are housing, senior housing or otherwise. And some, we get people all the way to the end and then it would fizzle out. Some of it's emergency shelters. But it still involves agency on the part. So we really like to have a broad book to pick from of service providers. So we will really work with anybody in the city. The county, nothing against the county, just don't want to get too pulled out too far away from the city unless it's a slam dunk, connection. But it's an evolving thing. I think that's another piece that is going to have to continue to shape and grow and over time become more effective. How do we ensure that the services that are being promised are actually delivered upon? How do we track people once we hand them over? These aren't things that first response groups usually ask, but down the road we may get there. But I will say everybody that we've worked with, had to adjust to us being on the scene. Some people, they were seeing 3-4 people a week, and then we started bringing 6-7 people a day. And if you're not prepared for that shift, it could create some animosity and difficulty for the teams dropping folks off, and maybe even some hostility to the people. And we've had to do some level set with a few folks, but I guess our approach is if you say you can do it, we'll find out one way or another. And if it's helpful for us and helpful for the people, we'll utilize it. And if not, no hard feelings, but our responders probably won't lean on that and put it lower in the list of choices. But if you're consistent, you deliver, we'll be there.
Thank you. Thanks for acknowledging Clara's commenting question, Elliot. We will open up. We will give you complete access to Elliot in just a few more minutes. I have a couple more things to run by him. So Elliot, I'm curious to see what your thoughts were when we started training scenarios and really having discussions around what it means to be adrenalized and how it impacts our decision making and all the cultural bias and capital we bring into that situation even before we were adrenalized, but it intensifies when we're adrenalized, of course. And so when we started doing these scenarios and firing everyone up in your little training room and then having discussions around them, as leadership, what was your thoughts? What were you thinking?
Just important, more like get them prepared. They're not gonna, you can't really know everything that folks are gonna run into. You can best prepare them. So anything that gets them to understand that remaining cool and calm is the most important thing, was important. This was new to everybody involved, even if you worked on the ambulance or did other things. So we needed everybody to have a baseline understanding of like, hey, when it starts getting ratcheted up, we got to learn how to take ourselves down. Because that is the key to remaining safe, key to communicating in tense situations and with tense people. So it's I thought it was extremely effective and just necessary.
So the thought process really for PAVE is our training in a corporate setting or in a workplace setting. It really is our Trojan horse. Our goal is to empower every individual to take this skill set everywhere, right? To take these human safety skills everywhere. So although our number one intention there with macro was to make sure we gave the macro responders a skill set around acknowledging their own boundaries and setting them, using their voice, situational awareness, communication, all those things, those human safety skills that are so important. We wanted them to come home safely because of the use of those skills. But we also want them to use those skills every day. And I think that's what we heard from your responders in conversations after, interactions. We had one of your responders on one of our presentations, on one of our podcast presentations. We spoke with you on the podcast presentation. Do you feel, or is it your sense, is your own personal opinion? I won't ask you to speak for all community responders, macro community responders, but do you feel the skill set is being taken with them outside of the macro work?
I think it's probably mostly used during, for the work. I think that it probably has more application for the work, but it's proven, it's shown dividends. We haven't had any incidences of folks having an outburst on shift or anything of that nature. And they are very more aware and in tune of, I think, of where they're at. If they're even, especially if they're low. When I see them at the end of the day, it's less heightened up. It's more, kind of beat down or drained. But I think it's been truly important in understanding, to be effective in this, you can't be hot, you can't be tense, you can't be ratcheted up or riled up, because it'll backfire on you. So really trying to encourage the teams to always keep that adrenaline check happening. It's critical. Do they take it outside of work? I'm not sure. I hope they, keep to themselves. I think it's good to have the space that we do allow them, from the job. We need you to be present when you're here, but when you're not here, we need you to be as far away as you can mentally, so that when you come back, you're ready. This is tough work if you're bringing baggage to it,
Yeah, understood. Yeah, that checkout process is important, that's for sure. The last question I'm going to ask before we opened up, I just want to make sure, I guess it's a comment, and then I'd like you to also talk about it a little more. I think, again, that secret sauce is that you're coming in with compassion, right? You're coming in with a highly compassionate and empathetic person who's responding to these calls. And I think that, coupled with a non-law enforcement portion of it, there can't be that law enforcement part where we have this CARES response team in Chicago. It is always accompanied with a law enforcement officer, always accompanied with a police officer. And it just, like you say, you don't come in with your sirens. You don't come in, with the hurricane, I'll say, that comes with a law enforcement response sometimes. So please talk a little bit more about that before we open up to questions, because I want to make it perfectly clear how macro is set up as not having a police officer enter into these situations.
Yeah, I think it all, a lot of the credit is to dispatch, not sending us into any violent or any situation with visible weapons or active violence or really criminal activity going on. It's an interesting contrast here in the Bay Area is that, macro has our way in the fire department, but BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, also has a version. And they are a co-response model with law enforcement. Again, a platform and a train is way different than out on the street. And it's this totally different set of circumstances and concerns, risks, and challenges in a confined space. Macro does not go into private homes. We try to keep as much as we can out in the public. We'll go into businesses, but need clear visibility and safety, scenarios. But the model with the police model, it's still based on traditional policing. So there's a lot of catch up. You're driving from station to station. And I know the irony of this is you're driving from station to station, and the whole time you're hoping that they don't get on a train and go Lord knows where. So it's kind of steeped in that. I think that, when you do that, you're you're checking for the wrong thing initially. You're already coming at it from a different place when you have these other entities with you, because they've had a way of doing things forever. Now I will say, most cops and firefighters know the individuals we're dealing with. They know, they have relationships with them. They've responded to them multiple times in certain instances. So by and large, I think there's a group that do know and understand the interpersonal dynamics that are important when dealing with people. And they are the first ones to call us. Hey, can you come here and talk to so-and-so? And that's really what we want to start to see happen more. If they get dispatched to something that they're truly not needed for, that they'll reach out and pull us in. That already happens. We haven't been able to truly isolate that because it all comes through the same funnel. But it's something that I think is extremely valuable when we start seeing more of that. And I know Bart and even San Francisco and other places have all tried to kind of play with and tweak their model. I think they're potentially going to more of a station-based model at their choke points. But they're totally different set of challenges. But it does show that these programs do not all have to be cookie cutter the same, that they can be adopted, they can fit your need, but you can't be too, you have to be willing to look inward and examine if something doesn't seem to be working, or if something is working, give it time to continue to grow and thrive. And I understand the need to move away from the desire that people have to move away from the co-response model with officers. But if that is the stage of crawling before you walk and truly open it up, let that be the stage. Learn from it. If this makes that department more accepting of alternative response in the future, it's not necessarily bad to walk down the road a little bit. And I look for a point in time where, if you want to be a cop or a firefighter, you're trying to spend time in a macro, in an alternative response, honing your empathy and care for the community. And then as you move into these other fields, taking that with you. But we'll see. Again, a lot of this stuff is new, but if cahoots is shifting, there's going to be some other shifts out there in the space, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying just reminded me that, through the summit, we have really been having conversations about things that really have moved out of cookie cutter, moved really into specialization and personalized approaches to things. The Chicago school system is doing whole school safety, where one high school might have a peace room, one high school might have a meditation room, one high school might have a gang interventionist, and one high school may have a traditional resource police officer there. But they're choosing for themselves what best serves that community in their high school. And so they're thinking out of the box. We see that libraries, and we heard from libraries that they are trying all kind of, they're being challenged and pressed, but they're looking for all kind of different solutions to keep growing and provide a safe culture for their community and their clients. So, this approach from your mouth to whoever needs to hear it, right? That maybe everybody has to come through a macro program before they become a full-blown law enforcement professional, and they learn these skills and these interactions with people as macro is approaching it. So we have come upon the time, Elliot, where we get to open up to some more questions. And if Julie and Clara, if you would like to hear more on your questions, please go ahead. If there's any way possible to turn on your cameras, we'd love to see you during the question and open the room up. And if anyone has a question, just kind of either raise your hand or use the little hand on your Zoom. Any questions for Elliot? Jules, are you asking a question? Oh, Cassie, go for it.
Oh. Go ahead, Julie. I was just jumping in.
Okay, I'm back to my question. Columbus, Ohio has 7 different alternative response to policing. Some in some have police, some have fire, some have mental health, some have EMT, some have just mental health. The community has no idea who to call about what. All of these are pilots that have been going on for about 1.5 years. The city has committed to a non-police response, a bunch of money, but we can't get past the turf wars that exist between fire, police, and mental health. Do you have any advice?
I would just hope leaders in those departments have more important things to do than to bicker over turf. That's the short answer. But really, I think this also goes back to dispatch. I think that that's the one linchpin in all this stuff. Like, they have to be there. They're the ones that can direct it. They're the ones that can say, oh, no, this sounds like this versus this sounds like this. And investing in that and doubling down on that and giving them all the equipment and knowledge and information and training and money, salary, all that stuff, you can begin to get a hold on all of that. I believe that folks truly don't understand how critical the dispatch side is to all this stuff. My father was an attorney, and he prosecuted Richmond PD, or not prosecuted, sued Richmond PD back in the day. And, you know, the challenge, the parts of the case were like the dispatch was calling the rogue group to go and do horrible stuff. It all started with whoever answers the phone. So, you know, it's the most critical piece of all of this. Yeah.
Cassie?
It's kind of a lead-in, like that idea. Number one, I mean, it's the touch point. That's the first point. Where do we go? What's the first thing we have to do? So that's the most important one, right? But I love that you have talked about all the ways that it was painful and the ways that you have to address each of those and pull back a little, watch and learn where some of our other folks just kind of jump to that big thing, right, that we talked about in some of the summit. He really, I believe, Elliot, you've done a great job of talking about. Now you have a little bit more time, but all of those things, it's culture on all of the sides. The police do this. People think the police do this because that's their experience. And how do we, it's a huge, huge change when you have people thinking, well, I'm just going to call the police and they'll fix everything. They'll just do what I think is best because culturally that's what's supposed to happen, right? And how we have to change it so much. When I work with my old work is working with men who use violence, men who batter. And one of the things that we had to teach him over and over again, he'd go home and be like, well, I'd be nice and she's not nice back to me. It's like, well, you haven't been nice to her for 5 years. How do you think that you're nice today? They're going to believe it. You are going to have to work way harder because of what you did, right? And it's great that everybody has to look at what they did and what wasn't working and how we work together. And so in any of these conversations that we had, we have to remember that it's going to take a culture shift up here for all the players, not just the one, right, that we think because we know what's right. And I just think that I really love that part. And I love what you're doing and how you've approached it. It's very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Elliot?
So I saw the question from Clara. So this is like a big point of contention. I think a lot of people in the city are saying, well, there's certain people that are never going to call. There's two ways to look at that. There's certain people that are never going to call, but at some point, those people will eventually call 911. If they need it, they'll call it. You know, there's a lot of posturing until you need the service. So I think that that's one thing that just has to be clear, but there needs to be a better communication push throughout the city to address who to call for what and when. And then really kind of reinforcing that almost ad nauseum to be like, nope, call this when this, call this when this, and make it so cut and dry, and really a huge push on marketing and promoting that. We get about of our dispatched calls, so coming from the 911 system, fire direct, or our email service, about 50% or a little bit more comes from dispatches that call or get come in, and the other 50% comes from our email. People like the email. It keeps things cool. You can write it. If you're truly in a non-emergent situation, you should be able to write a little quick email. So it really does kind of pull back and slow things down. And again, I think that our new city administrator really wants to make a push that there's multiple avenues. So 311, maybe they can also be a group that sends over to macro. 988 eventually, do they want to send things over to macro? The point is they're all going to have to come to the choke point of the fire dispatch center. So getting a macro direct number within there will hopefully add to that. But we also don't want people calling us for we don't want to be the fun police. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't want people that are just going to call. And that's going to happen. You're going to get that. But, really kind of keeping this focused on what you're going to get when you call macro, the type of response. And it may not be what you want to hear or what you want to see. We're not the move it along, get out of here, you can't be here business. We're not in that business. We're in the helping business. And it sometimes, the reporting party needs that explained to them. But just historically, people, when they call 911, they try to usually either exaggerate what's going on because they think that's going to help them get a response. They say the wrong thing, and then it elicits a different response. We had somebody that called in a call and the person's laying on their stomach on the ground. Finding somebody on the ground laying face down when that's an unnatural position. You need the cops and a bunch of other people there because there could be something terribly wrong. Really the person was on their back. They didn't have a good look at it. And when we approached it, because she was a reporter and we didn't want to have any bad press, when she reported it, or when we got there, the guy first thing he says, I'm allowed to be here. We're like, yeah, man, just sit up, drink of water, let people know you're not dead. That didn't need a fire truck or a cop or any of that. And he did have a right to be here. So we're not going to tell him to move or do anything like that. But, it's kind of resetting just the whole culture around public safety and how we utilize it. And, I was talking to somebody, I feel like cities could save a lot of money if they just had a phone line people could call to talk to about anything. I think that's what happens with 911. People call just to talk. So you need to think about, what other things can you do now, and how much you're going to pay the person that answers that phone call.
I also want to share with Clara some of the stories that I've heard of the work you guys have done. One of them was on an NPR ride along. I think you had someone from NPR riding along with the macro responders, Elliot. And it really was about this sense of community and connection and trust that you were developing. I think it was Jazzy who was involved in it and had come across this unhoused person, 6 or 7 times before he let her look at his leg. It was clear that there was some type of cut or sore or something that was making him sicker every single time they came across him. But it was like the 6th or 7th time that he actually allowed her to look at it, put a bandage on it, and treat it. I don't know if you remember that one in particular.
Well, I think there's so many. We recently had somebody we'd been seeing for over a year. So, 6 or 7 is low. It can take 200-300 visits, and it's just, maybe not that many, but at least 50, at least 60. You got to give people a chance to breathe. People have their lives, even if they're look on the street and going through a bunch doesn't. Sorry, I'm like dealing with some OT form stuff.
The real work of the manager. Yeah, I thought the ability to do that, to come across somebody 10, 15, 20 times to develop that trust.
So I would say like that already happens with the firefighters and the officers. They're kind of in this loop of having to go and see these people all the time. And it's challenging, it's frustrating, and everything else in between. So it's yeah, it's one of those things that when you're in the first response space, like somebody goes to these calls, somebody goes to these 450 calls that come in or whatever. And if you want to really keep the emergency focused folks focused and ready for emergencies, you got to get in there and disrupt that. So check-ins, stopping by and seeing people after you haven't seen them for a while, finding out what's going on, continuing to try to offer resource, consistency, I think, is really what has helped us the most throughout this. Like we show up every day. We're in service every day for the most part. So it is, when you can be somebody that folks can count on, I think that also begins to pay dividends as you build relationships and you become a trusted source that they'll listen to, that they'll trust. You're not going to, screw them over. You're going to take them to the next group who may end up screwing them over, but, at least you're going to do what you can for them, in the moment. So I think that's been extremely important.
Does anyone else have Dr. Louise, go for it. Oh, there you go.
Thanks. I'm so interested in what you're doing, and I'm really gratified to hear all of your stories, what you're doing. So thank you for your work. My question has to do with foster care families. In a foster family, you're not allowed to touch the child at all, except for, maybe a little hug. So if you've got a child in your home that's being violent, you end up having to call the police. In Oakland, are you interacting with foster families at all, or is that a space that you have been part of at all?
No, we only through the libraries. They called us for a kid who didn't want to go home, and they didn't know who else to call, so they called us, and he had been reported, as a runaway. So once that happens, we got to call the cops, and they showed up and dealt with it. And he didn't want to go back to the group home, and ended up having to get his grandmother from San Jose. It was this whole thing, and truly, beyond our scope, beyond the library's scope, I don't know where the Department of Children and Families was for any of this. They need to be more robustly invested in as well. We have the benefit of also violence interrupters and different, there's a Department of Violence Prevention here in Oakland. So we can call on different groups to be like, hey, this may be more suited for you guys to check this out. We have largely kind of stayed away from youth. It's just a whole nother bag of challenges. And still, like, we get calls from the schools about stuff. One of these principals was like, yeah, we had a kid banging his head against the lockers the other day. We should have called you. I'm like, nah, don't call me for that. Like, get some real help out here. You're in a crisis. Like, don't waste time calling the wrong team. But I think a lot of people also just don't know where to look and don't know where to go. But if anything, what we've learned with macro is that alternative response has a place in the city. And that's comforting.
Jen.
I have two questions. One is, besides dispatch and funding, what is your top ingredient for creating an effective responder team? And then two, if you could expand your responders, how many would you feel you would need to meet the demand or your perceived demand of what's going on in Oakland?
Well, I think through this period, we've really found out the floor. The next phase will be to find out where the equilibrium is, how much staff is truly needed. We're budgeted for 26 to 30, so meet those staffing goals is the next immediate thing. Wouldn't feel comfortable really speaking beyond that until we get that group in there and see what they can really do. And again, we are also still limited by the effectiveness of the service network. That side needs to be a whole lot better. So I would say that's probably the other critical limiting factor. And staff, and of course budget always, but it is, if everybody right now that needed help raised their hand and wanted help, we couldn't help them all. And I think that's true across the board in most urban settings. And Yeah, it sucks, but that's the cold hard truth. And if you want these other groups to build capacity, you kind of have to do it gradually with them. And that's the best part about the whole agency aspect of this. Like, you don't force people, because if you force them, you couldn't deal with the volume anyway. So let people be ready, and when they're ready, build out and be as prepared as you possibly be to give them everything they need to hopefully you know, make the changes that they need or get the help that they need.
Thank you.
We just have a few more minutes with Elliot, so if anyone has any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. I know we have some pretty incredible people in this group, so yes, Mandy.
Oh, okay, I'm unmuted. I don't know if it was covered before or earlier, but how did the police department receive macro, like the relationship? What were their thoughts when you guys started?
Um, outwardly there were nothing said. I think, it was about building trust. I feel maybe some older officers were, this old curmudgeons, I'm retiring next year. Like, all right, whatever, they had their opinions, but by and large, they've been supportive. We are a part of the apparatus. We hear from officers, thank you for going on this and doing that. The chief has said, the interim chief, acting chief, has said that that they're going on less calls. I think that the public expects this huge kind of immediate weight, and it's just not built for that. It's a gradual thing. You have to pull. There is no silver bullet and quick fix to public safety and community safety and support. And you can demand and say, go into homes and do all this, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be more effective. And what I've kind of seen is that people, maybe the foster situation being the exception, is like, a lot of folks won't call for certain issues. They just won't, and that's not whether it's police. They don't want anybody showing up. And I think that that's a thing. And we also get a lot of weird call. We had a call a couple weeks ago. It was at 10:30. We got the email, and it was complaining because 2 children were supervised screaming outside since 9:30 on a Sunday. This is like 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Like, really, they're outside playing and making noise. Like, that's what kids do. But somebody took the time to write this down. And, so that's what cops also deal with, and firefighters. Like, there's all these things that clog up the system when, you could argue if we were just better neighbors, we wouldn't have to deal with a lot of this stuff. I'd be almost out of a job if people, when they saw somebody on the street, were like, hey man, you need anything? You need some water? I give you, it's not rocket science. Everybody wants this kind of huge sparkling plan, but the plan is use empathy, connect to the, connect, offer some service, and then connect them to the service community. It's like, that's the magic formula.
Jen?
All right, one last question, I promise. It just made me think, like, because in all the work that we do, there's always that one story that stays with us that could be a success story or something that was very gratifying that you would consider a win. Do you have a story like that? That's something that happened within macro that, turned itself around. It could have been with somebody on the street or with a coworker or whatever, that really made you feel like, okay, this is working. This makes me feel good. That type of thing.
Yeah, I think we've had, thousands of success stories, I would say. Do some stand out more than others? Yeah, a few do. We helped a woman and her daughter get into housing. That was very impactful. just last week, there was a guy in a wheelchair who was stuck, and we helped coordinate his transport. And he was grateful, wanted a picture with the heroes, and that is, it goes a long way. So I would say that, we've tried to take an approach of just look at the data, look at the numbers, and read the narratives, but we may be looking and looking to shift that more to the narratives. But it's tricky because people need privacy, and people need you can't tell everybody's story. But there have literally been hundreds, some from early on, some from more recently. On the day of our 18-month mark, we helped a lady we'd been seeing for over a year. We finally got her into care, and it looked like it was going to fall apart, and saved. It all worked out in the end. And I think that's another good one. And I guess, really what I take away from is just the responders, how they feel when they've been effective, when they know they've done it. Like, it's like, all right, yeah, if they're feeling it, I'm feeling it. Do I need to know the particulars? Probably for work, but really it's they have done a good thing, and they should be proud of it. And I think that's the approach we've really taken.
Thank you.
Andy?
Last one. So real quickly, Elliot, what keeps you like motivated and like internally not becoming cynical? And what do you do personally for like burnout? Because this is like, nonstop and ongoing. So I'm just curious.
I'm the boss. I'm not allowed burnout. You just got to work. And I don't even say that, not even to be, coy or tongue in cheek. It's like, this is something new. It requires somebody, manning the ship and being there. Is this a sustainable pace? Probably not, but you can run it for a couple years, and just to get it to a safe space where you can sit back. That's what the push is. It's like, the first milestone was that first call. The second milestone was 1 year, or the dispatching. Then it was 1 year. Then it was 18 months. Now it's 2 years. And then you can kind of say, all right, well, we've done everything we can to put this in a place, and you can, turn into a regular city employee. But, for now, the fire department doesn't take the day off, and the fire chief doesn't take the day off. So, when you're dealing with first responders who work every day, you better wake up, and they better know they can reach you. So it's fine though. You get more tired when you don't focus on the right stuff. You end up fighting battles you don't need to fight, or taking offense for things that are truly outside of your control. Well, those are the more difficult things, but I think we're all learning, we're all growing. And when we get these next 20-some folks in here, that's going to be another real milestone for us, because it's like, all right, now we're really filled out. Let's see where this goes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, first of all, you guys do great work of being very transparent about your impact monthly. I think you even put up weekly stats. It's crazy how you guys can stay on top of that. But I'm excited to see what those reports are going to say in a year from now. Super excited about that, and excited for your program, Elliot. We are about to close it up. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question for Elliot about the program, or share something about a community responder program in their area? Okay. All right. Well, we are going to close it up. We have in our chat a survey that you can link to. It gives us a lot of information. If you take a few minutes on that to tell us what you thought about this session and other sessions in the summit. I can't believe we are finishing our last summit session and closing PAVE Summit 2023. Closing it out on a bang, Elliot. We are so grateful to have you take time. We know, PAVE knows very well the stretch of your staff, the stretch of your organization. So we appreciate so much that you've taken time to talk about, what you're doing, how you're doing it, the good, the bad. It really means a lot to us that you share that with us. And thank you again for being a good partner, a good supporter of PAVE, a friend of PAVE, and a personal friend. I really appreciate the friendship that we've been able to cultivate through this roller coaster ride we've been on. So thank you so much, Elliot. Is there anything you'd like to share with us on your way out?
No, just thank you guys for having me. Look forward to speaking with you all again soon, and thank you for your questions and your interest in macro. Have a good day, folks.
All right, guys, everyone be safe. Thank you so much for supporting us and being a part of a wonderful PAVE Summit. Thank you.